and writer. They're not the same thing. I'm here promoting my, regrettably, 2 books, Rest of the Wicked and San Rafael. I have a table down in Artist Alley. If you go down here to the escalators, which make no damn sense, and turn left and go a little ways down, I have a table there. I'm with LG Ransom, whom I honestly think may have written the first Sentai story for Western audiences with a female lead. I really cannot think of another one. Holland's Heir is called. Quite good. I read an original draft and then I read the most recent one, and oh boy, it's excellent. Anyway, moving on. So, all of us get to feel old because it is the 30th anniversary of, are we good? Because I was just killing time. Excellent. Okay, you're going to edit out all that uncomfortable awkwardness, right? No, it's already streaming on YouTube, right? Okay. It is the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy, one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, bar none. Let's see, and also my notes are not annotated for some strange reason I can only attribute to slapdash printing. It is also one of the longest running game series and has seen some of the greatest successes in gaming. It has been referenced in pop culture. This is from an episode of 2.5 Men, which I'm sorry. But the fact that they referenced an entire episode was based around taking I'm guessing that's a child, to get a copy of Final Fantasy tells a lot that not just Final Fantasy is one of the biggest games in gaming, but it has crossed over into general audiences because the grandmas who were watching this on reruns at 4 o'clock waiting on Steve Harvey to come on, they at least recognize the name Final Fantasy. And if you've got a demographic that far removed from gaming recognizing the name, that's clearly something. The game has, nearly the entire role-playing game genre has taken cues from Final Fantasy, including the ideas of limit breaks, multi-member parties, and multi-act stories. And it's not just video games that have taken these notes either. Tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons have taken more than a few cues from Final Fantasy. There was a written exploration, I want to say on Kotaku, I could easily be mistaken on that though, talking about how you could track Dungeons and Dragons editions moving closer and closer to Final Fantasy before they kind of veered off, getting into third 3.5, 3.6, 3.6 and a half, and then getting into 4 and whatnot, as getting closer and closer to emulating the Final Fantasy franchise. As this is the 30th anniversary of the great series, we're going to take a look back at the franchise to help define gaming. Do we have any questions before we move on? No? Good. All right. Fantastic. Squaresoft was the game developer from Japan. Excuse me, that didn't just hit my teeth. Founded in 1983, by Masafumi Miyamoto, part of the Den-Yu-Sha Power Company, and his father ran the Den-Yashu Power Company, and he created Squaresoft coming out of college, I believe. So I'm absolutely certain no nepotism was involved whatsoever. Miyamoto believed that rather than have a single programmer make a game, as was the standard practice at the time, he thought that you should bring together a small team of people to make the game. You should have programmers, and even multiple programmers, graphic designers, and even professional writers. Yay! They're going to make a few games for the Famicom. This is Death Trap 2, I believe, and this is Dexter. I'm honestly not sure how you pronounce that. Thexder. But yeah, then you're going to have Hironobu Sakaguchi, who's going to be a part-time employee for most of this time, and he's going to be hired on full-time as the director of planning and development. He's going to suck at his job for a little while. They're going to put out a string of failures, and almost all of them are going to be spearheaded and headed up by Sakaguchi. Square is going to face very serious financial difficulty. It is unclear whether or not that was, oh my god, that's going to get annoying fast. whether or not that was the entire company or just the gaming division. Anyway, faced with the likelihood of having to close down their doors, Sakaguchi is going to spearhead a long-time vanity project, which is namely an RPG. It's going to incorporate elements from Dungeons and Dragons and wizardry, with the idea of things like elemental weakness for enemies and the like. Amusingly enough, the elemental weaknesses are not actually going to make it into the game because of a programming glitch, but I'm going to start talking to the beat. That's going to irritate me. With the unprecedented success of Dragon Warrior, or Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior in the United States, as well as Ultima, the company is going to produce Final Fantasy, as we all know and love. Yay! It was devised less as a true project, as a true final project, and more as a swan song for a lot of developers. It was meant almost as a resume builder, so that when they left and went to other companies, they were able to point to this phenomenal game, this one last hurrah for Square Gaming. Final Fantasy is about 4 heroes, the Light Warriors, who have no names, and you get to give them whatever name you want, because what could possibly go wrong with that plan? Who go on a quest to save 4 crystals, because it's always crystals, corresponding with the 4 plutonic elements. Doing so, they're going to travel back in time to break a time loop created by the great monster Chaos. They're depicted by, I think, somebody off of DeviantArt, because I run Google searches for my imagery. The gameplay was exceptionally primitive compared to today, but at the time it was beyond innovative. You get to select between 6 party members. You have 4 character slots, and you have 6 character classes you get to choose: fighter, thief, monk, red mage, white mage, black mage. You can have 4 of one party, you can have 4 different parties, and it leads up to a combination of over 1,600 character parties that you can experiment with. I'm sorry, not 1,600, 1,300, my math has gone off. How many of you have tried the 4 white mages party? That's the fabled task. Like, can you beat Final Fantasy with 4 white mages? I don't know anybody who's even bothered trying, because you have no offensive skills until way late in the game. But anyway, the characters go through a class change later on, and I don't know why. The graphics change, that's about it. They're fundamentally the same. The game's going to introduce us to a lot of our staples from the franchise. It's going to introduce us to Bahamut, who's going to appear in just about every Final Fantasy afterwards. It's going to introduce the idea of the super boss, the hidden boss that's actually harder than the final boss of the game. In this case, it's a character called Warmick. And it's going to introduce us to Dr. Oom and Melmon, who is going to be retroactively renamed into Dr. Sid, who, as Sid, obviously is the staple of the game. Now, this is going to lead into Final Fantasy II. Final Fantasy, huge success, great story, blah, 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 nobody cares. This is going to be a more character-driven than the first installment, considerably so. You're going to have named characters, you're going to have dialogue, you're going to have characters that have their own story arcs and their own backstory. And it's going to revolve around the characters considerably. The gameplay is going to be based not around jobs, but on customizing the characters. Lip sync battle. That explains so much now. Okay, cool. I am not lip syncing to any of this stuff unless they do Bad Romance. In this case, I'm going to apologize because this panel's going to have to take a break for 3 minutes. Anyway, the story of Final Fantasy II is basically Star Wars, that an empire has gone evil, and the heroes who were once part of the empire have to come up and stop it, and then there's something about the moon and whatnot. The major problem with the game was that your characters improved through direct experience. That's cool, that makes sense. If you use a sword, you get better at the sword. If you use an axe, you get better at the axe. If you use magic, your magic rating goes up. That makes sense, right? Then one ass of a player found out, well, what if I hit one of my characters with a sword? So if I have character A hit character B, because no, I didn't bother learning their names. This game was never released in America until very recently. So you're going to have one character hit another character with a sword. So the character with the sword gets the sword bonus to a skill. The character who got hit gets the HP bonus. You guys can probably see where this is going to go. So people would spend days at the very beginning of the game just doing nothing but whacking their own party, while the monsters are going, guys, we're right here. It's a really clever idea, and it was really, really innovative. But regrettably, it led to just rampant abuse. You thought like munchkinning and min-maxing in tabletop games was bad. Oh, sweet mercy. Oh, yeah. Now this is gonna lead us into, somebody sung so bad that they broke the karaoke, that's all. It's gonna lead us to Final Fantasy III, which is obviously not Final Fantasy VI. This is going to introduce us to the job system that's going to start coming up again in about every odd-numbered Final Fantasy. You're going to have 4 characters who in the original version of the game are not named. In later versions, later re-releases, you can assign them names. They're going to collect jobs from magic crystals, and there are 23 jobs across the 4 characters, giving something like 15,000 possible party combinations. It's kind of absurd. This is where we're going to get the Onion Knight job, which you've seen a couple of times. If nothing else, you've probably seen Lulu has an Onion Knight doll in Final Fantasy X. That might be the dumbest name for a job in gaming history. Originally, the characters were the Children of Light, remakes of giving them names and personalities. The game is also going to introduce escort characters, where you're going to get an additional party member who will be with you for a short period of time. This is going to be introduced later in future Final Fantasy games. However, this is going to be the first, and to my knowledge, only time you can have a party of 5 characters. Future games are going to oscillate between 3 and 4 characters in your party, where an additional character is going to bring it up to 4. This is going to be the only one, I believe, that has 5. Yes. So, what? Tactics. Tactics? We're going to talk about tactics a little bit later. We're going to talk about the Principle 15 game. Come on, let's not play 13 games. And then we'll get to some of the knockoffs. We'll get into some of the slightly adjacent games. All right, so this is going to lead us into Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV. This is going to be one of the first games that's going to receive a direct sequel, but not. This is going to be the earliest game with the direct sequel, but not the first game. Rather than give you different character classes to choose from, you're now going to be introduced to a wide variety of characters. Each character, thank you very much. Each character is going to represent kind of a different class. You're going to have the Lancer, you're going to have the Dark Knight, you're going to have the Paladin, you're going to have the Crazy Old Man, etc. And you're going to be able to pick and match who you want in your party. And rather than change out jobs like in Final Fantasy III, or start with different jobs like Final Fantasy I, you're going to be able to pick and choose throughout the course of the game. This is also going to introduce us to things like the active time battle, so you're going to have the little gauge, although this is not actually going to have the visible gauge. That's going to be introduced in 5, I believe. It's also going to bring us back to the idea of straight experience. Final Fantasy II, you did not have straight experience awarded after a party, after a battle. You got the little increases to your skills, whether or not you use the sword. Final Fantasy III, you got a P for your job. And then Final Fantasy IV, they were like, nope, screw it, we're just going back to straight experience. You're going to get spells, powers, whatever, at a certain level. Again, kind of like Final Fantasy II, we have an evil empire that has manipulated, betrayed their champion, Cecil, who is the only truly permanent party member. Excuse me. And he attempts to stop them by using the 4 crystals to unlock the dangerous power because it's always crystals. How many of you played Final Fantasy IV? Excellent. Very good. How many of you played Final Fantasy II when it was released in the United States? I know, right? Yeah, there we go. There you go. Yeah, lazy translations. This is Cecil, the transformation he goes through, although it never looks that good in the game. Now this is going to lead us to Final Fantasy V. Final Fantasy V is essentially a remake of Final Fantasy III, just with better characters and better dialogue. We're going to see a lot of the same jobs in Final Fantasy III that we're going to see in V, but now you're going to have character class experience levels and job experience levels. So you're going to collect AP to level up the jobs, and you're going to collect experience to level up the characters. Simple, no problem. Well, there's only one problem. The game was horribly, horribly broken. Because why would you ever have a warrior class if you could get halfway through monk, get the unarmed skill, and then put it on a mage? Now you've got a mage with the combat abilities of a monk and all the magic abilities. The game done be broken. Never mind. This is going to introduce us to a whole bunch of fun new characters like Gilgamesh and then Kidu. Interestingly enough, it is generally accepted that there is only one Gilgamesh in Final Fantasy. And all the Final Fantasy games, it's the same moron. Yeah. Here are the job systems. You got the default, which really was supposed to be overpowered and really, really wasn't. You've got Knight, Black Mage, White Mage, all the fun ones. You've got Blue Mage, you've got Samurai, which nobody has any reason to ever be. You've got Berserker, which no one has any reason to ever be. You've got Ninja, which completely breaks the game once you equip them with swords, yeah. The game also introduced us to our first, I'm gonna go with cross-dressing. It's not entirely clear. You have a character named Ferris, who is awesome, who presents as a male originally, and you learn, spoiler alert, you learn that it's actually a woman. It's not clear to me if she's a cross-dresser, if she's transgender, or what. So I'm just simply going to say a non-binary individual, okay? Pretty revolutionary for it at the time, although not for anime in general. They had already had Rose of Versailles, I think it was. Anyway, all right. So, any questions? We're through the first 5 Final Fantasies. Excellent. How many of you have played all 5 of them? Well done. How many of you have beaten all 5 of them? If more than one person had raised their hand, I would have called everybody liars. There's always one, but there's only ever one. Because Final Fantasy 2 is weird.
Yeah.
And Final Fantasy 3's, oh. Final Fantasy 6, all hail Final Fantasy 6. Well, Final Fantasy 6 may be possibly the best game ever made. Thank you. There's really no qualifier to that. There's really no debate of, oh, I'm talking about best game of 16-bit era, best game of the classic era. No. Final Fantasy VI may be one of the best games ever made. Final Fantasy, it was released as Final Fantasy III because why wouldn't it be? Final Fantasy VI is going to follow very much the same mode as Final Fantasy IV, but it's going to allow customization through the junctioning of summons. What is that? Is the audio okay, or can all we hear is the bad dance music?
I can still hear you.
Excellent! Yay! Okay, good. So you're going to have characters who represent job classes, but you're going to be able to give them summons who will affect what kind of spells essentially they have access to, and summons will teach them powers the longer they are equipped. So you can customize characters by giving a warrior summons that will give them black magic, and yay, they can now use black magic. Which means if you play the game long enough, you can completely max out every character's ability to do everything. Which means every person that immediately did that, they spent a month of their life playing in the Veldt, trying to get, what's his name, the little feral boy, all the monsters' powers.
Yeah.
Gal. I wanted to say something like that in my head. I don't know why I had it. The game is going to boast an absolutely huge cast that is very, very diverse, and it's going to introduce incredibly complex storylines. The fact that the game is able to do this level of storytelling with comparatively very primitive text abilities is really a testament to the efficiency of the story. They have, 2 and 3 lines of text that they can show at a time, and they milk it for all it's worth. They tell an incredibly divergent story with a lot of different characters. How many of you who played Final Fantasy VI left Shadow the first time? More than a couple of people need to own up to it. You left. When they've said, the island's falling, we've got to go, should we stay? You said yes. And then you read Nintendo Power that if you let them ask 3 times, Shadow will finally get his ass over there. But no, you left him. You left him. You need to own it. Like you dive off of Yoshi when you're playing Super Mario. Don't play that game. There's a pile of dead Yoshis down there. Yeah. Here are some of the summons. These are going to become staples of the game. I don't remember who that is. I think that's Ultimate Weapon. Here's Alexander, who I swear to God looks like Titanus from Power Rangers. And I may be the only nerd in the room that knows what Titanus is, which is really saying something. Yeah, we're going to come back to this. Going back to the summons and junctioning them. So Final Fantasy VI, here's the great number of characters. Everybody's got their favorite. Everybody likes characters like Celeste, or they're wrong. Now we're going to come to possibly one of the most famous games of all time. Final Fantasy VII. It's famous for 2 reasons. Ask anybody at this crowd, they're going to say it's those 2 reasons. No, the answer is those 2 reasons. Final Fantasy is customization of the Final Fantasy. My things are out of order. Okay, I'm sorry. I got my slides mixed up. Okay. Really clever story involving basically a clone has mommy issues. And when he starts having emotional problems, because I don't know, he hit puberty, he decides to act out and destroy the planet. Because who hasn't thought about doing that when they were a teenager? It's going to introduce us to a wide variety of famous characters that everybody loves. Everybody has played Final Fantasy VII, at least everybody in this room. Don't play, I know you have. And I will wager probably 90% of the people in attendance at this convention have played Final Fantasy VII, as they should. It's masterful. You need to keep that to yourself. You need to keep excellent. You are a good person. The world needs more people like you, but you need to carry yourself downstairs and buy a copy of Final Fantasy VII. You need to fix what's wrong in your life. All right, because I'm just going to go back. One of these 2 pictures is yours. I'm not going to judge which one it is, but it's one of these 2 pictures. Okay? Now, the other reason, now I was going back, that's what it was. I was joking about everybody has a favorite character and they've got really, really complex stories. Barrett's story is incredibly tear-jerking when he has to constantly, basically abandon his little girl. Aerith, Tifa, Cid, who's an ass, even Kate Sith, whom nobody likes, had a real, you need to keep that to yourself, all right? You need Jesus, that's what's wrong with you. You need Jesus. You need to get
I only liked him during the offshoot of Dirge of Cerberus.
No, you need to stop lying to people. For whatever reason, the Turks are incredibly popular, and I don't understand why. People have tried to explain it to me, but I thought they were lying. No. Who said that they were cool?
You know the people who like the Turks, the people who want to grow up and be in the CIA.
This close to DC, I wouldn't joke about that. There we go then. Okay. So back to the panel. Customization in the game is achieved by equipping certain equipment that allows you to equip tiny little magic marbles called materia.
Great.
And so as you can see here, here's Barrett, who really does not get enough credit for being awesome. He's got these different little junctions. What am I doing? You guys know what I'm talking about. You know what materia is. Final Fantasy VII is going to be really remarkable because it's going to come at a time gaming is going to make an amazing leap forward by jumping to the PlayStation. I could harp on why Sony getting into the gaming industry was a big deal, but Final Fantasy VII is going to have 3D graphics through the use of polygons, and it's going to pioneer the cutscene. Beautiful, beautiful graphics. Going back to the fan art, going back to this stuff over here. We joke about this, But this is going to be really important. This is one of the reasons why Final Fantasy VII is so important, because it's not only going to radically encourage fandom in the form of fan fiction, but the amount of mileage cosplayers are going to get out of Final Fantasy is amazing. With the exception of maybe like Star Trek and Star Wars, the fact that you've got people still cosplaying as characters from Final Fantasy VII is incredibly remarkable. The community surrounding FF7 is amazing. Still writing fan fiction about FF7. And it's going to come about at a time that you're going to see the internet coming to the forefront. You're going to have these bulletin boards, you're going to have these websites devoted to fan fiction and fan fiction for specific stories. So Final Fantasy VII, part of what is going to make it so popular, make it so famous, is the fandom supporting it. Any questions moving on? All right. Now, Final Fantasy VIII, possibly one of the most divisive Final Fantasy games until recently. We'll get to that.
First fight is coming.
Oh, this is going to be a much more of a sci-fi game than a fantasy game. There are certainly plenty of fantasy elements, but there's a lot. Yeah! Balan Gordon represent. It's also going to have a terrible, terrible game mechanic called drawing, where you draw magic out of the opponents, and that's how you stop magic. Nobody liked it. It was an interesting idea, but it was dumb and nobody liked it. Anyway, there's the draw system. You're then going to junction your magic to various stats, and that's how you essentially raise stats. Yes, you can level up, but nobody bothered with that. You actually just junction better and better magic.
With that, I didn't know. I leveled up to like 80 something, and then I fought my own boss, and I win, but I didn't know why.
We can't do anything but be sad for her.
This game caused our first major fight.
I bet. I'm getting that impression.
She was like, oh, there's a time limit.
Who was your party? Who was your party? That's going to be important.
I don't remember.
You had Selfie in your party, didn't you? No, you had Quistis.
Yeah.
You see, no, get out. I know she's got that one limit break that makes her useful, but the...
I had GM.
I don't want to be your friends anymore. So you have all of these summons that you collect, and you junction them to different characters. They provide different stat bonuses, sometimes even allowing you to raise stats every time you level up, which means that when you got Ifrit very early on in the game, and you suck him on Squall and gave him the strength bonus by the end of the game, oh god. You were talking about one-hit killing monsters without magic junction. One of the neat things about Final Fantasy VIII is going to introduce that no previous Final Fantasy is going to have is interactive gameplay. Previously, you told the game what you wanted to do, it did it, and it told you how badly you messed up. Final Fantasy VIII is going to introduce the idea that Squall and Safer are going to allow you to hit one of the trigger buttons on the controller right as impact is being made. And it simulates them hitting with their weapon called the Gunblade, which was as dumb as it was awesome. Yeah, okay. Here are some of the Gunblades. Now, one of the problems and chief complaints with FF8 is the fact that there were very little items in the game. There was no armor to speak of, and each character had one weapon, and there were only four improvements upon the weapon for every character except Squall, and he had 5. Here is, I think this is missing a sword.
You are.
Yeah.
You're missing the sword, I noticed that.
Anyway, so there's only a certain number of items to collect. A lot of people enjoyed having the get all the swords, get all the armor, get all the bangles, get all of this, get all of that. And the fact that there was so little of that in this game, some players found frustrating. Now it's also worth noting about Final Fantasy VIII. Here are the various characters. Everybody has their favorite, and they don't mention it in public because, much like Final Fantasy VII, cosplayers are going to respond very strongly to this, and they're going to embrace it. Final Fantasy VIII on the fanfiction boards overtook 7 for a brief period of time, but 7 has had longevity that Final Fantasy VIII generally has not seen. However, the cosplay continues to endure, largely Edea. And every cosplayer, it is like a damn rite of passage for a cosplayer to make a Gunblade. It's like you're not a real cosplayer until you've made Squall's Gunblade. The fanfiction endured, don't judge, don't, no. You've got your own slash that you like, whether you want to admit it or not, and I don't want you to admit it here. But no. If somebody, and by the way, we're talking about Final Fantasy. If you're squeamish about 2 guys kissing, you're in the wrong damn room. The cutscenes were phenomenal, had even more cutscenes than Final Fantasy VII, and they were far more ambitious. And especially of note is Faye, what's her name? Faye Wong, isn't it? Yeah, Faye Wong. She's a Chinese singer. She is going to win Song of the Year for the 2000 Japanese Golden Disc Awards. This is the first video game to ever do so. I'm honestly not sure if any have done since. But this is essentially going to win the Japanese Grammy. It is going to be a huge success and intensely popular in the general audiences. It's even gotten radio play in the United States. Very briefly, and probably only in certain markets, but in like San Francisco and other places, I've heard that it's gotten radio play. Don't quote me on that. I'm looking at you, camera. But, yeah. Final Fantasy IX. All hail Final Fantasy IX. Hail. This is really just a gigantic love letter to Final Fantasy to Final Fantasy players. It's essentially a remake of Final Fantasy I, but with a very intense story, a very lovely set of characters, and enough hidden references to make the Marvel MCU look unambitious. I really shouldn't have taken the drink in the middle of that damn sentence. Again, it's basically a remake of Final Fantasy I, but with better graphics. Debatably, it's a sequel or a prequel to Final Fantasy I because of the whole time loop thing. You see a lot of the same characters. Obviously, they're very different. The characters correspond pretty nicely to the character classes in Final Fantasy I. You have the thief, you have the fighter, you have the white mage, you have the monk, you have the black mage. Debatably, you have a red mage and debatably you have a red mage. And then you have Eiko, whom is supposedly like a yellow mage, a summoner, and then you've got Quina, which is... Anyway, so... Final Fantasy. The progress in the game is made by getting new weapons, new equipment, and you can combine weapons and equipment, and each piece of equipment will have certain stats for that when they junction to a character, if they use that piece of equipment long enough, they learn this ability. So you gotta find some really obscure weapon and armor or whatever in order to get all the powers. And for the love of God, once you get auto regen, don't ever take the gems off of that. Really interesting storyline that has all the characters going through a lot of divergence. This Zidane, here is Freya, who, man, she's really overlooked in the annals of gaming as a great character. Eiko, who's annoying. I really prefer Dagger, not Garnet. I thought Dagger was a better name. And again, you're going to see a lot of the same beats. You're even going to visit a lot of the same locations, sort of, as seen in Final Fantasy VII. And it's all going to culminate in a really epic story that sounds like a prequel or a sequel or a remake. It's really hard to tell. And then there's Vivi. How many of you remember the first time you played through this game and got to the Black Mage Village and saw Vivi first understand mortality? How many of you teared up when Vivi decided, you know exactly what I was talking about, yeah, there we go. When Vivi decided to nuke Black Waltz number 3. Oh my sweet mercy. Incredibly emotional game. Granted, maybe not as emotional as when Eris gets run through by Sephiroth. Spoiler alert. But an intensely well-written and well-done game. And it had a lot of very dynamic gameplay. There was a lot of stuff that was not combat related, which was really kind of cool. And it was neat to see Vivi cast against the other great depiction of Black Mage characters in gaming, and this is the Black Mage from 8-Bit Theater. Which by and large everybody's forgotten about, which is a shame. This brings us to Final Fantasy X. I am so sorry. Fortunately, it's all uphill from there. What? Yeah, it really is. If you ignore the two main characters in the entire plot and most of the setting, it's really good. It's kind of, I do like to compare it to the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. Everybody except Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes is amazing. If you take them out, and in a lot of ways it's not their fault. If you're familiar with Romeo and Juliet, you know Romeo and Juliet are the worst parts of that damn play. So if you take those two out, they're great. Mercutio in that play, in that movie, is freaking awesome. Everything else about that movie is incredible. Anyway, we're not talking about that, we're talking about Final Fantasy X for reasons I don't understand. I hate you so much. Here's the reason why you tolerate Final Fantasy X, because Auron is awesome. I actually had visual jokes here, and I don't remember what they were. I didn't put notes on my jokes in my notes here. Lulu is really fun-ish, but she doesn't have the depth of character that you see with previous characters. She's not nearly as well written as Freya or Beatrix, whom she definitely takes notes from. She's not nearly as well written as Tifa, whom she clearly takes at least 2 attributes from. And so it's really kind of frustrating because they have a rich character here. They've got an interesting story. They just don't do a lot with it. I hate this game so much. No. Now this is Sin. This is what Sin should have looked like. I've heard the game has a really good story if you get to the end. And I try to tell people, you know that's not a point in its favor, right? If the game doesn't get good until after 50 hours and you're almost done. This is Seymour, who I think is the villain. All I remember was he was an ass, but he was actually nice to everybody, so it didn't make a lot of sense.
He was like a semi-villain.
Customization is done by using the sphere grid, which is supposed to be very, very dynamic. I never figured out how to be dynamic. It seemed very linear to me. I've heard from other people, like the 9 people who are able to play through the game, that you could do a lot of fun with it. I'm going to take their word for it.
You can learn everyone's move at a time.
Yeah.
That's not a big selling point for me personally. Again, I understand other people can. What?
You can just like moves you want and then you go to other things.
I understand that you can do that. I don't know how. And that's my failure. That's not the game's failure.
Yeah, like with Auron, you could really early in the game you could hop him over to Titus, and so he has strength and speed, and then you can pop him back over to Wakka's sphere from Titus's sphere, and then he can get the range and the accuracy from Wakka, and then you pretty much have the one-shot kill character relatively early in the game.
That's awesome, except for the parts where you had to say anybody's name other than as we've been joking. Okay, look, it's not as good as 7 or 8. All right, it was gonna bound to be happening, and the 2 kick, yeah. This is, however, the first game to have a direct sequel. Every previous Final Fantasy game, with the exception of Legends, but we're not going there right now, did not have a direct sequel. And that sequel is going to be X2. It's going to focus on 3 main female characters. This is going to be the first all-female cast in a major gaming franchise. Yes, everybody jokes how it's basically Charlie's Angels, but with video games. There's nothing wrong with that. Customization was done by introducing the dress grid, dress spheres. There we go. These are the okay, you guys know. All right, fantastic. Now, this is one of the problems with the game, however, and this is going to become a larger issue going forward, which I'm going to talk about towards the end. This is going to be the first game that's going to get really, really exploitive. Okay? Final Fantasy, and I'm not going to harp on this too long, but we are going to return to this. Final Fantasy, video games in general have always had characters with sex appeal. They always have, and there's nothing wrong with that fundamentally. But it's different from having a character with having sex appeal and being deliberately exploitive. These are the thief's costumes. We're going to come back to this. Next, you're going to have Final Fantasy XI. It's an MMO, which means nobody cares. This is a friend of mine. This is a drawing she did. I don't think it was in reference to me bad-mouthing Final Fantasy XI, but it might as well have been. If you can't see it, that's what you get for calling me a midget. And she's a white mage, blah, blah, blah. It's one of the races in Final Fantasy XI, but like I said, it's an MMO, so nobody cares. Final Fantasy XII. This is going to be in an effort to simulate the MMO feel, but not suck. Final Fantasy XII is going to deliberately try to cultivate a gaming experience where you do not have to directly control members of your own party. They're going to use a system called the Gambit system, where you essentially program your two party members to do what you tell them. You can program your principal party member to do what it does. You can take control. Excuse me. Oh boy, I'm already losing my voice, and it's Friday afternoon. So you can conceivably play the game doing nothing but the directional pad. You don't have to input any controls. You can take control if you wish. And you do this by customizing the controls using the Gambit system. It's a lot of fun. It is a little crazy though. You level up your characters and you get license points to unlock the license board. In the original Final Fantasy XII, all characters used the same license board, which led to the end of the game, whereas kind of like you were talking about with Final Fantasy X, every character has all the same powers. So there's very little difference between characters. The subsequent versions, the Zodiac, the international version, which was only released in Japan, oddly, and then the Zodiac Age remake, introduced job classes that have customized license boards. I have no experience with them. They honestly sound kind of dodgy, like they sound like they just downgraded the powers, like there's no benefit to them. But I haven't played the game, so I haven't played the Zodiac version because I'm not shelling out that kind of money for one game. Especially when the PS2 version is a masterpiece. But what? Yeah. So, a abbreviated but dynamic cast. It's going to be one of the first Final Fantasy games to not have a love story. Thank God. Because the love story works so great in 10. Excuse me. It's basically going to have the same plot as Final Fantasy II, which is the evil empire and that the person has to come out and try to stop the empire. You may have noticed a theme here thus far. Final Fantasies typically have two plots and they alternate for even number games and odd number games. Shh! Don't tell anyone because the formula works. Here we have two of the major characters, Ash and Balthier, and if you don't love Balthier, you do not have a heart because he's awesome. Yeah, it's Final Fantasy II. It's going to have a direct sequel, which like 9 people have played. Now, there's a rumor going around that it's connected to another Square game called Vagrant Story. It has been conflicted whether or not it is. Some people in the development of the game say that they take place on the same world. The stories are not connected. But it's like Final Fantasy XII takes place on one continent, Vagrant Story takes place on another continent. People who have worked on the game have, in different interviews, stated whether or not they are connected. So there's no official answer. So that leaves us to just decide amongst ourselves, do you think they're connected? You can decide what you want, but they are. Final Fantasy Tactics, same thing. Are they connected? Well, they all take place on the same planet called Evilise, but we'll let you decide. You do see certain species, like the Viera here, you see in Final Fantasy Tactics. Don't know what's going on over there. Final Fantasy 13. I need something stronger. This is going to be considered the start of the dark times. I'll let you know when the dark times end. it's a real shame too, because now, in addition to not just having a female lead, we actually have a pretty good female lead, at least conceptually. Lightning is really, really interesting. So why do we call this the Dark Times? Well, A, the game was bad. B, because this is when you're going to start to see Square just straight up pouring out their characters to advertisers. This is Louis Vuitton. These are official ads. That's Gucci. These aren't parodies. These aren't jokes. These are official ads. Now, let's be clear. Zidane was in a Coca-Cola commercial, so it's not like this is a fundamentally bad idea. But the assertion has been made, the charge has been made, part of the reason Lightning was given the lead was for the advertising possibility. And if that's true, that's a very cynical thing to suggest, but if that's true, that's really, really bad. You have an interesting world, I've heard. You have an interesting party, I've heard. The combat was an attempt to marry what had worked supposedly with Final Fantasy XII with previous versions. So you have an open world, but you still go into an actual combat sequence when you encounter bosses and when you encounter enemies. The leveling up and whatnot is done through what essentially, this is the Crystallian system. I don't care, so. It's basically the sphere system, the spheres all over again.
Worse.
Yeah. A lot of people would argue that Final Fantasy XIII ended up looking like a palette swap of FF10, and there's very little to dissuade that argument. Now, it's going to have subsequent sequels. Now, unlike Final Fantasy X that had one sequel, this is going to have, I think they're up to 3 or 4? Just 2, okay. Then maybe the other ones are mobile games. Anyway, I have heard legend that the sequels are significantly better. I've not met anyone who's actually played the sequels, so I can't say, okay, we can talk after, but I don't know y'all. We've already established, I don't know that I want to be friends with y'all. So,
Lightning Returns is better than the actual sequel.
yeah, but you could scrape your ankle on a bar that low. So, I will say that Shaz is pretty neat, from what I've read about him. And it is kind of neat to have, another black character that's not Barret. This is going to lead us to Final Fantasy XIV. It's another MMO, so nobody cares. However, it's an MMO that's so bad, they broke it and had to remake it. Do you know how bad that is? I mean, remember, this is around the same time Diablo was having their delightful fiasco where people pre-ordered and couldn't log on day one. So this is not a good day for MMOs, which is, any day. Again, MMO, nobody cares. This is going to lead us to Final Fantasy 15. Now, this is the most divisive game in the gaming franchise. It used to be 8, it's not anymore. It's Final Fantasy X, or Final Fantasy 15. Why? Because that's Final Fantasy 15. Look at that. Drink it in. Drink in that glorious awfulness. It's almost like it's not a bad game, it's like it was deliberately designed to be bad. The entire game was it seems to have been incomplete. People have gone into the code and found areas that were 90% completed, and so they're not sure why they weren't included. It is the first game to have an all-male cast. It's also the first game, that's the cast. I'm leaving that alone. It had a movie that was the precursor, because what makes a video game better than homework? People have said if you watch the movie, the game makes sense. And again, I have to go back to my original statement. It's like, that's not a point in its favor, right?
At least something else that was the actual end.
I don't know or care. Like, if a game is Voltron and I have to put it together in order to understand what's happening, that's not a point in its favor. But I had that problem with FF11, which I keep harking on and making fun of, and it's already 4:55. Holy crap, we gotta move. So, FF15, awful. There are female characters, they're just not actually in the game or anywhere you can see, but they're totally there, and they're totally hot, and they're totally smart. They just, go to another school. Yeah, we know how that works. It's a huge damn advertisement. How huge is the advertisement? Because pretty much all leveling and power-ups are done with your cooking skills and what ingredients of cup of noodles you're able to get. No, I'm not making that up. That's really the game mechanic.
That's only a temporary power thing.
Yeah,
Is it? Oh good, I feel slightly better.
It only lasts us for about like half the day to maybe the full day, depending on what you eat, what you made it with.
You know that's not a point in its favor, right? It honestly would have been better if they were permanent. Like if you went out and dealt with this, but at least you got a stat boost, that'd be awesome. But the stat boost is temporary. Oh goody, I get to buy more cups of noodles. Yay! I don't even like cup of noodles in real life. Final Fantasy Legend. It's another game system. Yep, there it is. It's right there. Technically, it's part of the Saga franchise. I like to compare this to... Oh, wow, I got lightheaded. Wow. So much rage for Final Fantasy 15. I like to compare it to Night of the Living Dead. If you guys don't know, two different people worked on Night of the Living Dead. George Romero decided he was going to use the Dead line, and Tim Russ, I want to say? John Russo. Wow, I was right off. Tim Russ is from Star Trek Voyager. John Russo took the Living Dead. So Return of the Living Dead is one franchise, Dawn of the Dead is the other franchise, but they all stem from Night of the Living Dead. Final Fantasy Legends is the same way. The Final Fantasy franchise went in one direction, the saga, whatever, large S, large G, went in the other direction. Mystic Quest, role-playing game on training wheels. Everybody makes that joke, but it honestly is true. This is a great game for anyone to play who's never played an RPG. Interesting story, simple mechanics, really colorful world, a lot of fun. I don't have time for this. I've got to dance. Chrono Trigger, I'm not going to harp on just because. How many of you have played Chrono Trigger? Excellent. You know how good of a game it is. Chrono Trigger is Final Fantasy meets Dragon Warrior. They brought together the Dream Team. To give you an idea, this would essentially be like Warner Brothers and Disney doing a movie. Oh wait, they did, and it was excellent. Chrono Trigger was incredible. It pushed the boundaries of everything. One of the neat things about it was when you went into a fight, your characters were positioned in different locations. That affected the mechanics of the gameplay. You had to actually think about where your characters were placed to affect how you were going to handle different fights. The same bosses, the same monsters, you would have to handle differently just depending on how your characters were situated. Gotta move on. It was followed up with sequels none of us got to see. There was Radical Dreamers, there was Chrono Cross, which nobody played, then there was Chrono Break, which nobody has heard of. Chrono Trigger was amazing. Like I said, Final Fantasy meets Dragon Quest, basically Marvel versus DC, only, really good. That's actually canon, by the way, which I think is really kind of neat, which means they did something interesting with Jubilee. Final Fantasy is the litmus test against all other video games are measured. This has led to the dark times, however, that it has become very, very merchandised. The issue is of whether or not this is demonstrative of Final Fantasy or modern gaming in general. You have a lot of this current complaints that gaming has become little more than a money-making industry. I do not want to turn the final minute into talking about the gaming industry and all of its ills. So we're going to rush through it. Final Fantasy Record Keeper, how many of you have played that? Don't. I legit got addicted to it. It actually inspired a gaming addiction panel. Final Fantasy Brave Exodus, Final Fantasy Mobius. These games are not... Final Fantasy Mobius is a little bit different. Exodus is kind of crazy because Exodus has an original plot, but the gameplay is based around nostalgia. Record Keeper doesn't even pretend. It's just a nostalgia game. Mobius, mostly a nostalgia game. It's got a plot that's terrible, but that's another story. At least it's original. the games are trading on nostalgia. There's very little originality coming through on it. This is Mobius, you get different costumes. We gotta move, Record Keeper. Spirits Within was the movie, nobody saw it, why should you? It was bad, even though it had an amazing voice acting crew. And it was the first time you're gonna have a non-real person as a cover model. This is actually important, this is actually significant, because this is the first time you're gonna have a computer-generated person as a cover model on a major magazine. Final Fantasy is one of the greatest video game franchises of all time. End of story, no questions asked, bar none, damn straight. All of you here have played at least one Final Fantasy game. You have a favorite character, you have a favorite story, you have a favorite scene, and it is a testament to how excellent this franchise used to be, and hopefully will be again. Go forth and enjoy, have a wonderful time. Thank you for coming to Anime Mid-Atlantic. My name is Robert Aldrich. Please come by my book set table in our establishment.